I want men to take responsibility.
I want every woman in New Zealand to know that.
I want women to
What do women want? We want to be equal. We want to be listened to. We want to be respected. And we want to be safe.
I think the next step in feminism is looking at how we experience being a woman differently. And women of colour in particular have a very different experience.
We are people who are competent, we've got agency, we've got skills, we've got so much to contribute. We want to be treated the same as everyone else.
I really want to live in a world that really embraces social compassion.
Thank you very much. Kia ora, welcome to What Women Want. What do we want? We want everything now. We're sick of it. Yeah. We just want everything, don't we? Yeah. We've had a few good fights in our life to try and make things good for women. And the fight is not over. Tonight we will be challenged, hopefully. We'll be inspired and we'll be educated by some of the top women leaders and change makers in this country. Right now, though, what we'd like to do is we'd like to take you back.
Good afternoon, my name is Hyacinth Thistle Bottom and I am standing here, as you can see, on the steps of Parliament in Wellington City, and I am waiting for a woman who I believe is pushing a barrow, and we are still waiting, so now.
Oh, man. Oh.
And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to, sorry, what's your name?
Name's Kate.
To Kate.
Shepherd.
To Kate Shepherd.
Sorry, do you know? I'm Kate Shepherd.
Yes.
Been going around the country getting signatures.
A woman going around the country for women, with women.
To get us the vote.
Get us the vote. Why would you do that?
Because we can't vote.
Right.
We don't have the right to vote, so we're sort of unequal, you know. And do you want to wear that skirt forever?
What are you saying about my skirt?
No, I mean it's a nice skirt, but I mean, you know, it's not easy to jump on your horse, is it? With that skirt on. Like, wouldn't you want to wear, like, I don't know, a pair of shorts? I mean, it would have been way easier to get through that horse traffic on Lambton Quay without this big long skirt on. I'm wanting equality for the sexes in New Zealand, and it's going to start with the vote.
Okay.
So your mate Kate's got your back. She's going to get us the vote, and it's all going to change. I'm telling you what, in 125 years, we're going to be sitting here. Everything's going to be equal. It's going to be amazing.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a moment in time.
All right.
Okay.
Can you help me lift this? Sorry, I've got a really bad back here. Can you take one?
Back, sure.
Oh, those stairs, they're so steep.
Good afternoon.
So 100 years ago, or 125 years ago it was to be precise, we got the vote. What do women want now? Can you please welcome our host for this evening, for the panels, Alison Mau, journalist, founder of #MeToo Project New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou, welcome everyone, ko Ali Muraho, and this is What Women Want, a very special show on the 125th anniversary of a very special day when New Zealand women became the first in the world to secure the right to vote. And that makes it the perfect time to reflect on how far we've come and where we're going as women in this country. Tonight, around 30 diverse, incredible women will join me on this very couch, and I'll be asking them this question: what do women want? I want to start with you, Renee. As the CEO of the Ministry for Women, in the land of make-believe, in a perfect world, we would have thought that there would be no need anymore for a Ministry for Women. Why do we still need it?
Well, you look at how we were created in the first place. So think about the 1980s. I'm not sure if Verity was...
No, it's like minus 10.
Okay. Everybody else think about it.
We're all old enough.
Yeah. So that time was an environment where you had the Waitangi Tribunal being established and you had homosexual law reform. So there was a real activist sort of environment going on at the time. And actually women fought for the ministry to be created, as women do, for the last sort of 125 years. Government policy was being made and decisions without that gender analysis or without the voices of women. So that's why the ministry was created in the first place. And there's still inequalities that exist for women in New Zealand and still some outcomes where we need to do better.
And until we have that sorted, we need you.
Yeah, well, we're probably one of the only government agencies that exists to do ourselves out of a job. And that's a really good ambition to have.
Has the ministry's focus changed at all? Because for a while, observers like myself have seen you focused quite closely on bringing women into leadership in this country. Is your focus changing?
Yeah, so there's leadership and also economic independence. So you look at the gender pay gap and the pay equity. So that those issues have made great strides. And now what we want to focus on is actually the well-being of all New Zealanders. So the New Zealanders that have the poorer outcomes, so Māori outcomes, migrants, refugees, women with disabilities. So all of those groups in New Zealand need that voice too, and someone to champion for better outcomes for them.
So that's not necessarily paid work anymore you're talking about, is it?
No.
It's the unpaid work that women bear the...
Yeah, so 60% of, obviously, women do the voluntary work in New Zealand, and that's not widely known or acknowledged or recognised in any way. So bringing awareness to that debate is actually a core issue for New Zealanders, I think.
Lots of nods on the couch. Erin, you'd be pleased to hear this. As head of the PSA, you would, I suppose, recognise that economic independence, particularly for low-waged women, really important, but also this sense that there's a lot of unpaid work that women bear the burden of.
Absolutely. We were having a bit of a discussion earlier about the fact that all the kind of policy settings around the parental leave arrangements mean that women will be the ones who go off and look after babies. Changing from maternity leave to parental leave didn't change the fact that it's still something that women are going to take, because the number of weeks you can take is so short and the amount of money you get paid isn't matching kind of a salary. So what happens is that in a heterosexual couple, the person who earns less tends to take all of the leave, and because of our pay inequity in this country, our gender-based pay inequity, it's often the woman. So we're not encouraging through policy men to step into that unpaid caring work, and we're also not recognising all of that unpaid work that women are doing in societies. We think that the gender pay principles we've been working on with the Ministry for Women can help to address some of this, which is really great if we can roll it out. Just over a year, actually, we've had the massive pay settlement for care and support workers. Christine Bartlett was the face of that, but of course it's a mass movement. There were big unions behind her, thousands of workers supporting that campaign, which lifted women off poverty wages and changed their lives, actually. So our members are saying things to us now, a year after finally achieving equal pay, that they can, finally see their kids who moved to Australia, they can finally drop that secondary employment that they were relying upon. It's changed their lives. It hasn't just meant that they're economically dependent, it's meant that they can make decisions and participate in society in different ways. And also the domestic violence bill, our union has pushed really hard for domestic violence to be understood as a workplace issue, for women not to feel ashamed of the fact that they suffer from violence in the home, and for employers to make it an okay conversation to be having, and allowing women that space to, seek a friend's advice, take the kids to a safe place, see a doctor, see a lawyer, or escape,
Let me stay with that just for a second, because you told me recently that you were dealing with a woman who needed that leave but wouldn't tell her employer that she needed the leave because she didn't want to tell her employer that she was in a violent relationship.
I represented a woman who was under disciplinary action because she wasn't seen to be performing well. She was turning up late, she was distressed, and she was dishevelled. I'm amazed she was turning up at all. And it was because there was domestic violence in the home. There wasn't, at that time, a bill like the domestic violence one, and there wasn't domestic violence leave in her collective agreement. So there was no opening for a discussion to talk that through with her employer. And so what ended up happening is, as I said, let's raise it, and she said, no way, it's embarrassing, she lost her job is the end of that story, and so she is now financially dependent on the person abusing her. And I think we've probably all got stories of representing people in that situation, which is absolutely why we needed that leave, because if you have that, clause 3.2 of my collective says I can take this leave. It just opens up that conversation, and it takes away the stigma and the shame for those women who desperately need that time.
Prue, I have a massive question for you. I hope you don't mind. So, 125 years since suffrage. It was another 50 years before we got our first Māori female MP. How have Māori women travelled in the 125 years since women got the vote?
I think we're probably at a point where we need to be very clear about acknowledging that Māori women come from a completely different standpoint in terms of asserting their needs, their wants, and that comes out of the issue of colonisation. We're now talking about that word a little more. I'm not saying we're talking about it as much as we should, but we have to look at the fact that we had a society that had a much better view about Māori women traditionally, and colonisation and Christianity blew that apart. And we need to acknowledge that and move on and see that there is within the feminist movement, within the women's rights movement, a different aspect here that needs to be addressed, because we have to decolonise, we have to address colonisation before we're going to have the kinds of results that we need for Māori women. I think there is a greater acknowledgement and recognising the disparities, but when we talk about pay equity, the gap is huge between Māori women and men, and Māori women and Pākehā women. So, all of those issues, I think, we're at a point where that's critical now.
Yeah, Verity and I were talking about this the other day, the fact that the structure is actually white men, white women, Māori men, Māori women, Pacific Island women, disabled women, and so forth. We will come back to that. Fiona, what are the specific issues that rural women face?
So a lot of what Rural Women New Zealand has been working with is the isolation of women. We've been around for nearly 100 years, and recognising that our women living out in rural areas can be quite isolated by distance and by services. We've discovered that with a lot of centralisation of services, getting access to health services, to education, can be really, really tough because it's a long way to go. Issues around connectivity is probably the biggest one that we struggle with now, that a lot of our people, our women and our families struggle to get decent internet connectivity, and there's no cell phone coverage. So
how does that affect a family, particularly a woman who's trying to run a family on a farm?
A lot of ways, because a lot of business is all done online now, so you expect to do your taxes online, you expect to do your banking online, all that sort of thing, and if you don't have access to affordable and decent internet, it's very hard to do those services. A lot of young women these days have moved from the cities or with the way that rural jobs are now, we tend to be a lot more transient, so we're moving away from the traditional family unit of having family next door to help us with the children. So these women are very isolated, they've got young families, they don't have access to childcare very close by, and so that can make the stresses go up a lot higher. And we talk about the paid parental leave. A lot of our women are working in a farming relationship, farming partnership, so don't actually get paid parental leave. So we often hear the stories of these young mums, how am I going to take my baby to the cow shed? How are we going to get this done because I've got a young child and they don't have that care for them or those support services. Because yes, again, a lot of our rural women are working, or our farming women are working in unpaid jobs or underpaid jobs because it's part of the farming partnership and they get a drawing or anything like that, so they're not getting wages, and that could be an issue. And we found that with Property Relationships Act bill, that a lot of these women, because they're unpaid or underpaid on working on the farm, when it comes to a relationship split or something like that, they don't have the equity to say, well, this is what I've earned versus what the partner has earned.
Big philosophical question for you, Verity. Do young women, millennials, face isolation issues that are not necessarily because of distance, but are there nevertheless?
Yeah, totally. I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions, right? That because we're all like super connected now, that we're all really happy about that and we're all having these fulfilling relationships. I probably would say that like one of the biggest challenges about being young women is feeling like you have a lot of friends, but nobody who you actually like and no one who you actually talk to. I'm sure you guys all laughed at that. I'm sure you know the feeling, right? And something that the YWCA Auckland does a lot of research. We do the insights research each year with a bunch of young people, lots of young people. We ask them what's up, and consistently they say mental health, and particularly loneliness, and struggling with the fact that you might have 20,000 followers, but you never see them in real life, and they don't care about your life. So yeah, I think isolation, especially in an age when you feel like you should be connected, is kind of worse than ever.
What does progress look like to your generation?
So there's two parts to that, right? So number one, what does progress look like? I mean, personally, we've talked about this a lot already. I would like to go into a workforce and be paid the same as a guy for doing the same thing. And that's what, we're all about, is we're
Seems
about
fair.
Equal pay. Seems pretty normal, eh? Like, you think that'd be a sort of reasonable suggestion, but nah. And I think one of the hardest things for young people is they leave university or, whatever they're doing, and then they go into the real world and they realise that young women are going to get paid between, if, I'm a Pakeha woman, 88% of every Pakeha man, but, if I'm Pacifica woman, that's 69%. So you realise that there's this huge gap between what you told was going to happen and what actually happens. So that's something I would like to see us in a world where I'm not paid less and no woman is paid less than a man for doing the same thing. Have we made progress? Yes, but what I found interesting about Me Too is how many women have had the same experiences and still have the same experiences. Like, it got me talking to my mum about our experiences, and she's had the same experiences that I had, and her mum had them, and I'm sure my great Granny White in England probably had them as well, but it's just really depressing because you're like, we're still having this conversation.
I think so. That's why Me Too is such a kind of ray of, we've all clung onto it as a ray of hope, because it provides an opportunity, maybe, for us to draw a line under that and
hopefully,
hopefully, fingers crossed.
Put your voice into something and actually tell people what you care about and what you don't want to happen. And that's what we're seeing more and more and more. Even, in Wellington, where a young woman marched, hundreds of young women marched to say, this is not sexual harassment is not acceptable for us. So there's movements and organised people getting together that actually are saying in the environment, hey, we all think the same way, this is not acceptable for us, and that's what we have to encourage.
Can I get a quick, what's one thing that you would want for New Zealand women from all of you? If we could start with you, Prue.
I mean, at the end of the day, you want women to be confident in whatever they're taking on, and whatever they face, that they know that they can do so with support. Instead of making decisions about what we do, how we do it, how the workplace environment, that we do it because we know that that's what we want to do, and we know that we've got support behind us, and what that support looks like, and an acceptance, because there has to be, in all of these areas, an acceptance that it's not okay, that we've got this history, and we're going to move on from here.
Karen.
What I would hope for New Zealand women is that they understand that there's power in being collectivised. And obviously I work for a union, and through the union movement you can make massive changes, not just in your workplaces but in society. But as whatever issue we're collectivising around, we can make much more progress together than we can by ourselves. And there is a lot of pressure. I think sometimes the mainstream media paints women as being somehow in competition with one another, or in conflict that doesn't exist in my experience. In my experience of women, and I've met women from all over the place who have lived very different lives to me, we exist with a kind of innate solidarity. And what I would hope for New Zealand women is that we realise that collectively we are extremely powerful.
Renee?
I think we need to, keep our optimism up, because we can't take our foot off the lever, and actually the environment now is really conducive to having a say. So let's keep our acceleration down and see where that takes us.
Okay, for me, I think it's all about empowering our women, and actually what I often talk about is like, we hear this woman go, I'm not working, I'm just a mum, or I'm just working on the farm. I'd like to take the word just and the word only out of our language, and actually say, look, I'm really proud of what I do, because it's actually holding our communities and our country together.
Nice. Verity?
I would like to be able to walk down the street at dusk to the dance studio, which is probably 100 metres away from my house, and not have my keys through my fingers.
Preach.
I think that would be really great. Yeah.
Yep. You, me, and a lot of people. Thank you so much, Fiona, Renee, Verity, Erin, and Prue. And somebody who is by no means just any ordinary New Zealander joined me on the couch earlier today. Here's Helen Clark.
Welcome to What Women Want, a reflection and a celebration on the incredible events of 1893, when my great-grandmother's generation successfully campaigned for and won the right to vote. We all stand on the shoulders of those women as we work for a country where women genuinely have gender equality. A lot that's positive has happened, but we've got some frontiers to conquer yet, not least the remaining pay gap between men and women, and also working to bring down the truly dreadful rates of domestic and family violence in our country. So let's keep up that campaigning spirit that my great-grandmother's generation had, the great-great-grandmothers of some, the great-great-great-grandmothers of others. We can do it. We can achieve full and genuine gender equality in our country.
This next segment is going to be a pretty hard one.
That's right, because it's about ending sexual violence, which is probably the most important thing we're going to talk about tonight. There was a woman in America who once summed it up, and they asked her what the difference between men and women were, and she said, men are afraid that women will laugh at them, and women are afraid that men will kill them. It was a pretty strong thing to say, but as women, we all know this. We all carry it sometimes in our hearts. We want to be safe.
The past 125 years have brought us quite a long way when it comes to sexual violence. We tend to forget that it's only just over 30 years ago that New Zealand legislated to make rape within marriage a crime. 1985, that was. Now the hashtag #MeToo movement internationally has made the conversation much broader. We now know it works on a spectrum from unwanted comments or jokes right through to rape at the other end. All the women with me on the couch tonight have experience of the subject. Welcome to you all. It is great to have you. Before we kick off with the questioning, I want us to hear from somebody who is a survivor. This is Naomi Porter.
He had said, don't talk to Dad about it. You can't talk to anyone else about it. I was raised to listen to people that are older than you, your elders, regardless of their age. If they're older than yourself, you have to listen. And so I didn't speak out, although inside I was crying for help. When I did try to get help for it, I wasn't believed, which created like a sense of depression as well, and suicide. I was so insecure about it, I felt unsafe. From what I've seen firsthand, it's a vicious cycle that's probably gone through generations, and you don't want that to carry on to your younger siblings or your younger cousins. You want to stop that from happening again. I was a victim of sexual abuse, and I was afraid to ask for help or to speak out. I want young Māori women to know that if you feel that way, you're not alone. You can speak out, you can reach for help.
welcome to all you wonderful women. I want to start with you, Kim. You are the first ever Chief Victims Advisor to the government. Right. You've been in the job just a few years. Why was that position needed?
There hasn't been a focus on victims within government, a sole role that is focusing on victims before. The beauty of the role is that it is independent, so I'm not a government official, and I can provide free and frank advice directly to the Minister. We know that only about 1 out of 100 cases of sexual assault is likely to result in a conviction. That only about 9 cases of sexual assault are reported to the police. Out of those, about 3 get to court, and out of those, about 1 results in a conviction.
Out of 100, yeah.
So what are we going to do with the 99 other alleged offenders who are in our communities? How do we get treatment, and how do we get safer communities?
You first got involved in this area back in the mid-80s.
Yes.
What was it like then for victims of sexual assault, and what did you do about it?
I started in 1986 at Auckland Sexual Abuse Help, and I was like a sort of a rape crisis worker. I would do the call-outs, overnight call-outs, and support a woman as she went to make a police statement, had a medical. In the 80s, the system was quite barbaric. There could be male doctors who would examine a rape victim, and sometimes there would be a male photographer who would come and take photographs of their genitals. So a number of female doctors got together and formed what became Doctors for Sexual Abuse Care, and they had a 24/7 service, and they made
so
sure
there was
that
a phone
counselor.
tree, and
Yep.
somebody could be called at any time of day and
That's
night
right,
to
yeah.
come in and,
Yeah.
and be with a woman.
Yes, yeah.
Who'd made a complaint.
Yeah. We were described as a feminist agency, and back in 1975, there was a leading psychiatric textbook that said that you could find incest at 1 case per million in the population. This is a leading psychiatric textbook, 1975. So when feminist organisations started talking about incest at about 1 in 10 girls, for example, and sexual violence at 1 in 4 girls, 1 in maybe 6 boys, it was seen as a feminist conspiracy, and we had bomb threats. We had threats to our personal safety because it was described as we were making it up.
Louise, does any of that ring true to you in the way that you were treated when you first reported?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a horrible process to go through, but I thought by doing it the right way, after I disclosed to the family, where do I go from here? Back in the day, we did have a rape crisis in Rotorua. And so I rang them and I said, look, I'm wanting to make a statement to the police about being raped by members of the police. How do I go about that? And they turned to me and said, sorry, we can't help you. And I asked why, and they said, well, we work alongside police, so we might lose our funding. So that was the first slam door, but with the support of family, they encouraged me and said, you can do this. The right counselling, the right counsellor, she said, you can do this, and so I did. And in 1993, I walked into the Rotorua police station and gave my first statement.
And we know, I know from the women that I speak to, that one knockback can be the only knockback you need to shut your mouth forever and not go through with making a complaint. So I'd like to tōtako your bravery, as many people have before, obviously. What are the changes that you've seen in the past decade that you've been working with police?
Oh, look, I've from way back then to what I see and hear from the survivors that I support is that a lot of them are saying, oh my God, my detective is so cool. So it's the right training, it's the right knowledge and education given to police, because I do police training twice a year, and it's basically making it personal and saying, at the end of the day, the next person who walks into your police station could be a member of your family, so how would you want them treated? Definitely not by the way I was treated or by how many survivors have been treated in the past. And it's the belief, to actually say to a survivor, you know what, love, I believe you. And I don't know where this is going to go. The investigation has to take, but I believe you, and I'm going to do all that I can. And by having that copper who's going to be that go-to person and help support in the process, alongside specialist support, regardless of the outcome, if it actually gets to prosecution, we've got survivors that are walking out of a courtroom with their head held high, knowing that they've done absolutely bloody everything in their courage and their strength to make the person who harmed them, who hurt them, who raped them, accountable for their actions. And I give it to my survivors, the strength and courage of that.
Porter, we have a really big problem talking about this subject in this country, don't we?
Huge, absolutely huge. And it's so vast that most middle New Zealanders don't have an understanding of the vastness of it.
You're a survivor of abuse in state care.
Aye.
We now have an inquiry underway into abuse in state care.
We've got a huge problem. We've got children being taken from their families and re-abused in state care, and that's not okay. So finally we have a Royal Commission. New Zealand is the last one in the Western world to actually carry one out. So we've got lots of other world reports or processes to copy from. Surely we can get it right, but already into the 3-year term, we're a year in, and they haven't even appointed their commissioners yet.
Do you see women represented in their process?
No, I don't see women's voices being central enough. And just as many women in state care were abused. 73% of those that went through state care are Māori. Then we need te tiriti centredness in there. We need to have women commissioners. So when survivors look to the panel, they need to see themselves reflected back.
It takes a lot of courage to be able to speak about abuse, whether it's in a court or whether it's in a panel, and to speak to strangers who may not understand is doubly difficult. So we need people who are listening to survivors to have an absolute understanding of why it was hard to speak out and the brutality of the system.
Worst thing you can do to a child that's disclosing sexual abuse is to not believe them.
Oh, yeah.
First port of call is to believe them and acknowledge that they've been very brave in speaking up.
Porter, how do we get people to start talking about this? And I suppose I'm thinking in the wider community and in Māori communities.
It's a huge problem in Māoridom, huge. And you know from recent stories such as Arani's story accusing her husband of being part of a paedophile ring. Those are really hard conversations to have because the onus is on someone that is a loved and respected member of the community, and the more mana they have, the harder it is to, well, behind closed doors. And, you know, perpetrators are not monsters. They are our brothers, they are our fathers, they are our kaumātua, they're respected members of the community. They hurt our children, and they hurt women, and they hurt mothers. How do we have conversations? We put our big person pants on and we sit around and we learn about why it is that perpetrators perpetrate. We listen to the stories of our children, of our women, and we do things like this, and we are brave. And even when we're told to shut our mouths, we get up and we get knocked back down again. We get up, we get knocked back down, and we get up again. That's what I've learned to do, and I do that in the work that I do, and all of us here. We learn to speak up, we speak our truth, and we're not afraid. Well, we might be afraid, but even if your voice shakes, speak your truth, stand together. I think that's why you brought us all together.
It is, it's exactly why. You're making me. Latavi, you are New Zealand born of Samoan heritage.
Yes, Samoan and proud.
Are Pacific Island women objectified in a different way to other women?
Yes, yes. Yes, we are. There's a really harmful narrative that's been passed down for many years. It's called the archetype of the dusky maiden. It was created back in the day by the Western male gaze. And it's really about creating this stereotype that Pacific women are there to be sexualized, to accommodate white men as means of a vacation. And it's not okay. No. We are full human beings with inherent worthiness, all of us, as wahine toa. Yeah.
So how does that play out in real life? And I'm looking at you, Brittany, and Johanna. What are the experience that you have had in the kind of nightlife that I no longer have to worry about?
If I'm out having a drink, I will not let that drink out of my sight. Because someone might spike it, and it sounds so extreme.
You're only doing that kind of stuff to protect yourself.
Yeah, walking down the road at night time and you've got your phone out and your headphones in, but there's nothing in, so you can hear if someone's coming up behind you, crossing the road to avoid men. And if you look at what happened recently, that beautiful young woman, Eurydice Dixon, and after the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and there was so much in the media about the police being like, girls need to wear running shoes, and and it's like,
don't ever wear short skirts. Don't drink alcohol. Don't walk alone ever.
It's
like who can live their lives like that?
And I
stay locked away.
Exactly. And I think victim blaming is so present in this narrative, and it's so frustrating that it so continuously happens.
Lauren, perhaps you could have a go at this one. It's about the way society blames women perhaps for the assaults that we suffer.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's part of our unwillingness to address the reality of the monster that is that dangerousness. And I think particularly when we're working with young women and we encounter some victim blaming attitudes and we think, oh, why is this happening? It's a safety tool because they're going, oh, if I control what I wear and what I drink and where I walk, then I have some degree of control. That's a lot safer feeling than the reality, which is I have no control. So I think that a lot of that comes from that fear and also just not knowing how to talk about this, not having the language to talk about sex, let alone to talk about sexual violence.
What do the t-shirts mean?
So I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Nope means no. And we made this t-shirt because we were incredibly frustrated with our own sexual education in high school. And
also from our own personal experiences, obviously, as a young woman.
And we wanted people to be able to put their consent level on their bodies if they feel uncomfortable being able to say no to somebody.
Kim, jump in.
I think we've really got to be concerned about the amount of pornography. We shouldn't even call it pornography, we should just call it violence against women because it's degradation, it's humiliation. 80% of 11-year-olds have seen something. And I know that a lot of young men and young women are looking to pornography that they can get online to learn about sex.
And that's their first sexual experience.
And then the young women are seeing this and pressuring each other into they need to perform in this way. It's a global problem.
Lauren, we're going to come to you because you're the one teaching our school kids about these issues, about consent, about how to be a good friend in these situations. Tell us about the programs that you take to schools.
With Body Safe, we are breaking down what consent means because our Crimes Act doesn't even have a positive definition of what consent is. We spend so much time going, it isn't this, it isn't this, it isn't this, but we're not actually equipping our rangatahi with the language to go, okay, what do I do then? And so they are lost, and all they can look to, like Kim said, is porn and mainstream media, which teaches us the opposite of that conversation. So we're giving them the tools to ask for consent. We literally have a lesson that's about, okay, this is how you have the conversation. You need to ask, you need to listen, and we go through all of those steps. And we also talk about, being a supportive friend, because we know a lot of the time if young people are experiencing this, they actually are turning to their friends first, and we know that that's a massive burden for another friend to support them through that. And like Paula said, it's about believing them. So we teach, a lot of what we teach is around myth busting, around actually sexual violence isn't just, a stranger in a dark alley, and it isn't just, it can be, it can also be lots of violence to the body and lots of bruises. But there's a misunderstanding of what sexual violence is, that actually it's anything sexual without consent. And so we're really reframing it for them and then giving them skills so they can talk about it.
What's an active bystander?
An active bystander? I was teaching that this morning. So an active bystander is somebody who can take notice of a harmful situation that's happening. They can use what they've learned in Body Safe to go, that doesn't look like consent because that person's not into it, that person looks very young, that person's drunk. And they can develop a safe strategy that allows them to step in, because we know that it's hard. We know that there are things that make it difficult to step in and stop sexual violence from happening. There are so many safety concerns. So an active bystander is someone who creates a safe strategy to step in and stop it from happening. And a lot of the time for young people, that's about going, hey, actually, you're allowed to call someone in this situation. A lot of young people are scared to ask for help because they don't think it's important enough. So it's about going, yeah, you can call for someone, you can get a group together, you can create a distraction, and getting safe adults involved.
Latavia, is there a problem amongst some ethnic communities in getting hold of that kind of specific teaching for young people?
Oh, I'm such a fan of your mahi. I've actually been to that workshop, which is incredible. But I do think we have some more work to do in regard to investing and creating those preventative measures that are incredible. But I don't think we need to make our different communities come to us. We need to go to them.
Aye.
We need to change our tools to fit our different environments. We have different values, and that's just facts. We're very community-based. We're genuinely raised by a village, and so for it, we can't really have that individualistic mindset. And a big barrier for us is, you know, I speak as an individual, not representing my entire Pacific community, because I don't want to get hate in the Samoan Observer. But you know,
fair enough.
But you know, there's the idea that reputation of the individual reflects your entire family and your entire upbringing. And if you expose a perpetrator, you know, who, you know, as Paola said perfectly, is a leader in your community, then that's a reflection of your entire community. And especially because the negative narrative's already out there about our people, there's even more hesitance to talk about it. But it needs to be talked about in order for that restoration, for that rehabilitation to take place. But I really do think more preventative measures that are culturally safe and accessible need to be created.
And just to make another point here, most perpetrators are known to us. And many children growing up with sexual abuse in their home, it is normalised for them. And that is one of the reasons why they can't speak up about it. And when they learn about how other kids, their friends, it doesn't happen there, it's a, why not? Is there something wrong with you? To that degree. And these are some of the things that we need to be aware of, we need to be talking much more about. And yeah, most abusers are known to us. And why? Because they have access.
The hashtag #MeToo movement, which brings me a lot of hope. Do you feel the same way about that?
Well, I think the Me Too movement just opens it up for everyone. Diversity becomes zilch. We all become on the same stage, same platform, because it's about together we have to have the conversation.
My PhD was on women who'd experienced childhood sexual abuse. It took them on average 16 years before they were able to speak out. One woman said it was, 56 years before she told anyone. Me Too allows people to speak out, and it really is inspiring.
30 years, May. What about the younger guests?
Yeah, well, I just sort of to add on what you were saying, it does allow people to speak out because you don't have to tell your whole story. You just have to join this collective and all you have to say is Me Too.
It's like the acknowledgement is a really important first step to moving forward and going, what can we do about this together?
Okay, so what can we do? What do each of you want?
We want it to stop. We want to be safe. We want to have the choice to walk free in the world and for a future for our children, our girl children, all of our children.
I want our communities to help each other and parents to help children. Don't be afraid to actually have conversations with your kids. Let's not wrap them in cotton wool. Let's have that conversation to understand what sexual violence, it's not sexual harm, it is sexual violence, and how we can prevent it.
Lauren?
I think I want consistency. Consent shouldn't just be, you know, a cool little topic we do in health. Consent should be emphasised from everywhere, you know. It should live in every space.
I just want to be safe, and I want everybody else to also be safe and feel safe.
Latavia.
I think I'm going to be a bit ambiguous with this, but I want New Zealand to make a genuine and authentic investment in well-being. When I talk about that, I think in our perpetrators, I want there to be accountability, but I also want rehabilitation. We don't want to dehumanise anyone. Hurt people go on to hurt people, and that's an important thing we need to remember. But then with our survivors, I want historical trauma to be acknowledged and to be addressed. I want the present narratives to change, and I want victim blaming to end.
Thank you so much to our panel. Thank each and every one of you for your korero this evening. It's been fantastic. Thank you. So, just in summing up, what I hear from that wonderful panel was that, you know, it is great that we have a Chief Victims Advisor. It is great that we have a police force that is now ready to meet the challenge of women presenting with stories of sexual assault, but 1 out of 100 result in a conviction, and that's simply not good enough. Thanks again, ladies.
Well done.
Please welcome our next special guest, camp mother and camp leader. Consent is like a hot buttered scone. Now, if I say to someone, would you like a hot buttered scone? And they say, oh my God, I'd love one. Make them a scone and let them eat it. All right? Now, if I ask somebody, would you like a hot buttered scone? And they go, maybe, no, I'm not sure. You could make a scone for them and pop it down, but don't make them eat it. Now, if somebody says, no thank you, I don't want a hot buttered scone, then don't make them one. Simple as that. It's just off. The hot buttered scone is off. If you pop over to somebody's place on a Sunday night and have a hot buttered scone, don't assume that they're going to give you a hot buttered scone on Wednesday. Now, if somebody's unconscious, never, ever, ever give them a hot buttered scone. All right? And they also can't answer the question, do you want a hot buttered scone? Because they're unconscious.
The bottom line is, without consent, it's rape.
That's right.
I want women to be properly paid for their valuable work.
I want the pay gap for women and men to stop.
I want to be hired for my qualifications and not my look.
I want stay-at-home mothers to be more valued.
I want women to be respected for the work they do and not the way they look.
I want women to be paid the same as men because we're just as valuable.
I want there to be a conversation in New Zealand about gender quotas and targets.
Here's a tricky question for you. How do you fix a massive problem that so many people don't even accept as a problem at all? That, incredibly, is the state of the pay equity debate. There are many New Zealanders who believe the pay gap is a myth. Surely we can all grasp the concept of equal pay for equal work is just and fair. And I wonder if Kate Shepherd was around today, is this what she would be fighting for? Pay equity. Usually it's happened to us all, right?
Yeah.
Bev, do you want to start?
Yeah, when I started in the workforce at 17 years old, I worked for a law firm, a Queen Street law firm actually, just in the accounts department, 17 years old, and took over from a young guy. The rate was $11,000. And I thought, this is fantastic, straight out of school, $11,000, brilliant. What I didn't realise for a few years after that was that, in fact, he was on $17,000. And back then, that was a lot of money.
You know, actually, there's differences that come into play based on other demographic factors. I mean, I was a barrister, but it was always the men that would kind of ask to be categorised as being more senior. And as women, we kind of all waited until we had, we perceived ourselves to be good enough and all of that, because no one ever comes and tells us we're good enough. And so there wasn't that kind of mentoring. We just didn't rise. So we would be doing the same work, but we weren't categorised as being senior.
You know, one of the things that I would say really stands out to me, both as an artist and as a speaker, and a writer, and kind of a miscellaneous creative person, is that the number of times that I'm asked to do things for free is just staggering. And I'm a giving person, and I really love to try to give back and try to help people. But I also, have a mortgage and have a living to make, and also have skills that deserve to be valued. And I have found one thing that's interesting. I kind of expect sometimes that there'll be, I've had lawyers and accountants ask me to sing particularly for things for free, and I've kind of thought, if I went into your office and asked for a consult, do you think that maybe you'd give me an hour of your time in your law firm for free? Really good exposure, I might do a little social media post about that. But, so there's that. But what's really stuck in my craw is that actually often, the most often when I'm asked to do things for free, it's generally around women's empowerment. And it just clangs me over the head, because it's like, hey, newsflash, if you want to empower women, pay them. So that's kind of the main thing that stands out to me.
So oftentimes when we're talking about pay equity, we hear that women just need to ask more and then this problem will get solved. And so interestingly, my example is of a time when I was asking. I had been accepted to join the management team of a startup, and I needed to negotiate for the equity I would get. And so I did my research, and I knew what the market amount was for the level that the startup was at and the role that I was doing. And so came in and very clearly presented my case of, here's the amount that I think I'm worth, and here's the reasons why. And then after the meeting with the board, the CEO came back to me candidly and said, Lauren, they think you're too aggressive and you're too bossy, and now they're concerned about working with you and you coming into this role. And so I ended up having to go and do a lot of individual meetings with board members to show them that I'm amicable and kind and friendly. And it was a lot of extra work, and I realized that the advice that I'd gotten had been from men, and it had been strategies that do work really well for men. But ultimately what I had to do was read a lot about Sheryl Sandberg and other women and how they've done their negotiation processes, because the rules are different when women are doing it.
I think a lot of people don't understand the basic terminology, right? Pay equality, equity.
Really, pay equity is about valuing the people that we have on our team. And if someone finds out that someone else is doing similar work and getting paid more, that intrinsically means that someone feels devalued. And so in terms of the business case, you can see the implications for productivity. Unhappy people aren't as productive. You can see the implications for retention. If I don't feel valued in this workplace, well then I'm going to start looking for other companies that will value me. And so all of those then end up having financial implications for companies that aren't thinking about these topics.
Lizzie, the arts and entertainment, the music industry have their own problems with pay for women, don't they? Explain.
Well, there's a number of different issues there, but I think one of the key topics that I think gets missed in this discussion around pay equity and pay equality quite often is that of freelancers. And it's so difficult to have any kind of knowledge of what other people in your position are being paid, from different company to company, different contracts. It can be so variable. It's so competitive, and especially the industries that we've worked in with media and with me with music. A lot of young women are so vying to be in those industries that they don't really know when they're so young that they're just coming in. They don't really know how the game is played. So they're kind of ripe for exploitation. And there are very exploitative people in those industries, both professionally and also sexually. As a young artist, I kind of felt like, well, I so wanted to be in music that maybe I just have to put up with this, and this is just the way that it is. And I think that kind of mentality can very quickly break people down, and it's not good for the industry. It's such a volatile environment with so few checks and balances, and it's really difficult to know who to even go to ask for a pay rise or to stop that lecherous old dude from groping you.
And it's overt and covert, or covert and overt. I know that in television the message is quite plainly, there is another woman younger than you that is ready. She's like right there, ready to take your job, so don't complain. I need to come back to you, Goldrist, because you're the only one on the couch that's kind of in charge of public policy, I suppose, such as it is in your position.
Anyone who is in any kind of a group that suffers discrimination knows that as a member of that group you have to work 20 times, a million times as hard to prove that what you're experiencing is happening because of discrimination and not just because you're bad at your job or whatever. So without an independent oversight body, I think we have gone backward, because the fact of the gap is something that's in dispute now. We're not just talking about how to remedy it. But I mean, we had, Jan Logie had a bill and it's still in the ballot at the moment, and she's now the in charge of sexual and domestic violence, so Under Secretary, Her bill was all about making sure that companies had to make salaries transparent so that people could negotiate with, that kind of footing, and that it would create sort of a natural oversight mechanism in a way. But we don't have that, and I think we have to take responsibility as the government to actually do something about this.
And there need to be teeth as well.
Absolutely.
Bev, you're in support of that idea of transparency, and I think you are too, Lauren, where everybody's in agreement on this. And other countries are doing this, aren't they, already?
Yeah, lots of countries are already doing this, and a lot of Scandinavian countries have used this well out in advance and have had some incredible results because of it. How can we deny that it's going to bring women up to where they need to be? And some businesses have been absolutely transparent in their
Which
work.
means publishing salaries.
Yes.
That's quite scary for some companies.
Yeah.
Should it be limited to companies over 100 people, with over 100 employees, or?
No, I don't think so. And look, some small businesses have been very happy to do it as well, but some large organisations, but also they've put some mandates around it. They haven't shown the package. They've shown the salary and not the package.
Just going back to the transparency mechanism too, I think a piece within that's even more helpful is when companies are very clear about the formulas that they're using to calculate the salaries. And so even if a company doesn't say this person makes this much, this person makes this much, if they say, look, our salaries are dependent on the type of role, the experience, the performance, then people can look at that and say, okay, first of all, is that how my salary was calculated based on this formula? And then we can start to have a conversation around, is that formula fair for everybody? And so then instead of these individual one-off negotiations where this person thinks their salary is off and it gets corrected, the conversation becomes one about the systems inside the company. And every time we're having that conversation, the improvements that we make are actually for everybody, for the benefit of everyone who's getting their salary set by that equation.
Bringing women into leadership positions, it's not happening as fast as probably it should. Bev, what do you say to a company when you go in there and you recognise that they do need more diversity and more women in leadership positions?
Instead of hearing we couldn't get candidates that met whatever standard, and so we've got more males coming through, or another male coming through into that senior role, or back into the management team, or up into the executive team, because there weren't enough women or no woman applied for the role. we're getting them to rethink what that role should look like. So, and we're also getting them to have another look at what that recruitment and selection process looks like. So when that panel comes together, so first of all, have a panel of people that actually have a look at the people coming through the recruitment process, and also have a look at the people coming through, the actual criteria for the role you're looking at. Why does it have to be this flavour? Why does it have to be this box? This person have to meet this criteria? Why can't we change what that looks like? That's how we're going to get divergent thinking in this organisation. That's actually going to change. It's actually going to bring innovation, creativity through. You're going to get a lot more women applying for these types of roles if you can change what that looks like.
Sort of following on from what Bev said, the piece I'm especially interested in is that piece around who's getting promoted upwards, and we know that we're losing lots of women along the way. We know that women are opting out of workforces when they see that there are blockages in front of them. And so one of the key things around that is who's getting the step-up opportunities. And unfortunately, one of the biases that we have for women and people of color and other marginalized groups is that when they do succeed, we often credit that success to the team or to luck or something beyond them. Whereas when it's a man or a white person and they succeed in a role, we say, oh, it's because they're more competent and they're really good at that. So specifically around that, it's in terms of things that organizations can do. One is around making sure that people across the board have access to senior leadership so that senior leaders can actually think of them and remember them and think of who should be getting those roles. And then also doing a review of what's the criteria for doing those step-up opportunities. So again, being really specific on the criteria, what actually matters for this. And then instead of an ad hoc, this is the first person that came to mind, let's have a clear process for who gets that step-up opportunity.
Lizzie, in your industry and the industries you've worked in, they sometimes look female-dominated. But they're not necessarily all the way through, are they?
No, I mean, what happens, I think, in a lot of industries, but particularly, I think, in media, you have, if you go into a newsroom, I mean, you would know this, you'll see lots and lots and lots of women, but the higher up the chain you go, the fewer women there are. And so basically any role that has power attached to it and responsibility is generally held by a male member of the team. There's kind of two pieces to this. One is that in the boys' club there's a whole lot of shoulder tapping. So there's, this role is coming up, you should apply for that, and I will have a word to so-and-so about that role. That's happening all the time in many industries, but particularly music. And then the kind of the flow-on effects from that just mean that we don't kind of have the same thing. We're not having women shoulder-tapping other women or men shoulder-tapping women to say you should come into this role. And I think part of the reason why we're not having women shoulder-tapping other women potentially comes from this kind of deficit model that we're in that, we are forced to compete against other women, so massively, but basically kind of for survival a lot of the time. And that's particularly common in music. And a good example of that would be like, a record label. And I've been in situations where this has happened, where they've kind of said, oh no, we've already got our one female artist for our roster, we don't need another one, we're not going to sign her. And the same thing happens at music festivals. Oh no, we've got 2 female bands on the bill, we don't need another one. And actually if we have another one, then people won't want to listen to that, so it'll just be some screechy girly shit. And then actually, you just end up with this situation where we're forced to compete against each other. So there's no sisterhood when you've got so little power available that you all have to basically slog it out against each other.
Goras, your party cannot be accused of not having enough women representatives, so we have to congratulate you on that. But how do we start to unblock that at a government? Like, what can government do?
Yeah, so people sort of cringe and squirm when we talk about affirmative action and making space and quotas, yeah, and that's this thing, but actually that's the only way it's going to happen. It's a temporary measure until substantive equality is a reality, but meanwhile we actually do have to make that space.
Other great ideas for getting more women into leadership?
A couple key things, and these are strategies. I'm really interested in the strategies that forward-thinking companies can choose to do, because they're not going to wait for national policy or some of these bigger picture and really important things to happen. But there are a lot of companies that have said, well, we care about this for business reasons as well as moral reasons, and we're going to take these actions. And so two that I've seen be really effective are, one, having clear mentoring programs in place, and that's not just senior women mentoring more junior women, because we know there's not many senior women. It's having senior people in general mentoring more junior people. And there's actually a benefit when it's senior men mentoring junior women, because through that mentoring relationship, they learn more about what it's like to be a young woman in an organization and some of those challenges. So that's the first one. The second one, and this is my personal favorite, and it goes back to the unpaid work conversation. Women, even in paid roles, are often doing a lot of unpaid work. And again, this is intersectional, so it's not just women, it's people of color. The people who are often cleaning up after parties, the people who are organizing birthday gifts and cards, that's all unpaid work, and it's much more often done by women and by people of color. And we expect them to do it as well. So we don't give them the same appreciation and thanks when they do it as when a man is doing it or a white person is doing it. And so companies that come up with thoughtful ways to make sure that those roles are shared are making sure that that unpaid labor is being distributed fairly, because no one's getting promoted based on the fact that they cleaned up after every single party that happened, unfortunately.
Kia ora. Thank you all for participating. This has been absolutely brilliant.
Women in New Zealand, on average, over a lifetime, earn 12% less than men do. That means that for every dollar he earns, she earns 88 cents. So obviously, Kate Shepherd shouldn't be on the $10 note. She should be on the $8.80 note. Seeing we're being paid 12% less, we should do 12% less. Let me walk you through it. So if you are working, for example, a 40-hour week, sisters, for 4.8 hours a week, drift off. Do nothing. Stare into space. If anyone says, "What are you doing?" you say, "I'm having my lady time." If your job involves emails, I want you to delete 12 emails out of every 100 without reading them. Nothing bad will happen, truly. I've been doing it for a year. Nothing bad happens. If your job involves filing, alphabetizing of any kind, sisters, I want you to each choose for yourselves 3 letters of the alphabet that you will have nothing to do with. Take the problem home, right? Take the problem home. This is how we have always affected social change throughout human history. You make the political personal. So at home, if you're cooking dinner, don't cook one of the vegetables properly. If anyone says the potatoes are a bit hard, you say, yes, they are. It's a political statement. Here's how we get pay equity by Christmas. This is what we do. When things get a little bit frisky in the bedroom, stop at 88%. Apparently it's the last 12% they really like. Thanks very much. Have a fantastic night.
We have appalling statistics in this country when it comes to family violence. The fact that so many women can't even count on being safe in their own homes is, well, it's a national disgrace, isn't it? You really can't call it anything else. And we want to be able to leave our homes and walk at night in safety without wondering whether we're going to be accosted or raped or murdered at any moment. It's a real fear, and we want to be able to live without that fear. And at work, we want to be able to come to work and do our jobs and pursue our careers in safety without being harassed or preyed upon. Is that too much to ask? New Zealand has the worst rates of family and intimate partner violence in the developed world. Incredible, isn't it? We have brought together this panel of amazing women who've seen that with their own eyes and can talk to us about methods and fixes, I guess, that might even change your life or save your life. Before we get started, let's hear from two very courageous women.
I want men to take responsibility for their anger. On my 21st birthday, I had these teeth punched out from my ex-partner.
I fled the house in pyjamas with no shoes on. There would have been no point in staying around and trying to reason or trying to say to him, calm down. He had gone.
I went back to him and back to him.
You have no self-esteem. You're robbed of anything, any strength within yourself. You're worried how you're going to survive outside of this environment that's already so toxic and so frightening.
And the life cycle is still going around.
There is no darkness so dark that a ray of light can't seep through. The moment you speak out to someone else, you've let that little bit of light come in. That light can only grow, and other people will help you get to that next stage, and you will build from that. I want women to come out and be supported, not afraid, ready to speak out and know that they're going to be heard.
Deborah, I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind. Given that we have the worst stats in the world for this, you would think we would have developed some of the best systems to deal with it. But we don't even really know that much about the experience of individual women.
Yeah, I think in New Zealand we're really good at saying it's not okay, but we're not really good at saying what it is, and we're not really very good at all at responding to it. And we know that only 20% is reported to the police. So 80% is, we don't know anything about women and children in those situations. And it's an even higher rate for sexual violence as well, of non-reporting. So the responses that we have at the moment in New Zealand are really fragmented, and people work in silos and don't really talk to each other about creating a sort of national response, a way that we can really wrap around women and children and help them towards safety. So that's a huge reason why we set up Backbone Collective, because we felt like if we want to address these terrible statistics in New Zealand and we want to help women and children be safer, we need to find out from them, actually, how does the system work and what do they need in order to be safe?
Katrina, tell us why you hit the headlines in the past couple of months.
Well, I made public comments criticising a judge who had imposed an extremely inadequate sentence in a domestic violence case late last year, and a man assaulted 3 people and was granted a discharge without conviction. And I've been involved in domestic violence work for 20 years, and I'm well aware of the penalties, and that was just very lenient. But what was particularly concerning was the comments made by the judge, which were incredibly victim blaming, and he said that the woman had done no credit to herself with her actions, and he then said that many people would have done what the male perpetrator did, even though it's against the law, and that's just completely inappropriate and unacceptable for a judge to say that. I would have liked the Law Society to come out and say what I said, because as lawyers we've got a duty to promote respect for the justice system and uphold the rule of law. And if we just support everything judges say, even when the public and the community can clearly say that the judge is in the wrong, I don't think that does uphold the justice system.
Most of these women would not want to go, as I know in the work that I've been doing for the last 6 months, they don't necessarily want to go on the record. So you set up something where they could safely bring their information to you?
Yeah, so mostly it's not safe for women to speak out as individuals about their experience of violence and abuse, particularly if they're in the family court. They can get into a lot of trouble and be punished for years for speaking out. So what we tried to create was this safe, anonymous conduit so that women could just take part in online surveys. We're very much a virtual organisation, and report back about what their experience is and the system has been. And then we can write reports and flag the issues and advocate on their behalf as a collective for much needed system change.
Katrina, as a lawyer, what is your take on women stuck in violent family situations and the way they are treated by the justice system?
I completely agree with what Deborah's saying. The family court deals absolutely inadequately with domestic violence. What happens when women and children come to the family court for protection? Actually, they're not believed and the violence is minimised and denied. We should be believing what the mums and the children are saying.
Ruhine, Ronnie, if I may call you that, protection orders should protect people, surely, do they?
Nope. No, I haven't been an advocate for protection orders. I learned at a really early stage of when I started as an advocate. I believed what was on the paper. So as I walked through with the woman, there are different stages that say criteria that you can't do this and you can't do that and this is what will happen. You can call the police and become arrested and go through court. Well, no. First you've got to get the police there, if there's even that. So after the first couple of times of getting let down for me, for the woman, because I was the one that was walking her through the process, I didn't want to walk her through because they don't work. There has to be a whole heap of things that she has to prove. And if it's emotional and mental abuse, you can forget it. Women are often asked, you need to be protecting your children, otherwise we'll take them away. And that comes from either it's been oranga tamariki, child, youth and family, or whatever they're called, they're still the same. And it's really disheartening because it doesn't change. And I've been here 32 years in this work and all this goodwill that people talk about, it actually doesn't work for the woman herself and it needs to.
As the head of the Waikato Women's Refuge, can you talk us through what happens when a woman comes to you in crisis?
We're the largest refuge, unfortunately, and we have something like 80 to 90 cases a week. And so a woman will be brought through, we have to assess her to see where she fits, whether she wants to come into the community or stay in the community or whether she wants to come into a residential. I'm always an advocate for having the woman come into our safe house.
Are they always ready to acknowledge what's happened to them?
No. Often, because you don't get into the relationship with those tactics first. I mean, the partner, if he showed her those tactics and those behaviours earlier, it'd be like, hello, we're not getting in a relationship together. But that doesn't happen. It's always the love triangle, and it's after a time, some of those things start, breaking down. So. If the partner is continuously putting down, isolating, using emotional abuse, mental abuse, it wears down because you're isolating from family, you're isolating from your friends, and sometimes she does not see that. Often for me, when I used to recite to the woman, I was in the front line. When I'm on the front line now, no one lets me on the front line, because I'm always wanting to look at finding the man straight away. I want to see whether there's an opportunity to make a change and a difference. Are you willing to change your behaviour, or are we going to go like this again? So I'll know which way then to work with the woman.
Whānau obviously can be a massive help to a woman who's going through a crisis like this. They can also be a hindrance to the woman ever coming to you in the first place.
Yes, they can. If they don't have the understanding about why you keep going back, we're supporting you over here, we'll do this, this and this, and you still keep going back to him 10, 15, 20 times, they give up.
Anjum, do you see similar problems with whānau and community?
I think one of the things that you find with many ethnic communities is that because there's such a high level of negativity, and at the moment, and it's around the world, we've got this huge discourse around immigrants and so on, and the way that wider discourse plays out is that communities hunker down, and anything that's going to lead to more intensive attention towards that community, they want to shut that down. And so what you find is that therefore they don't want the woman to report, because as soon as it goes to the police, it becomes a much more public matter.
And everybody gets blamed.
And everyone gets blamed.
Community.
And so the kind of support that a healthy and normal community that wasn't having to face this kind of negativity all the time, that kind of support just isn't there. And it really does work against the victim, because not only does she have all the normal pressures that other women face, but she's also facing a community that is actively encouraging her to stay there, to not talk about it. And that isn't just with domestic violence, it's also very strong with sexual violence as well, is this need for the community to protect itself because they know that they're all going to face the consequences if it gets out.
They don't always want to leave the marriage, do they?
A lot of women, they don't, because of cultural factors, because of isolation or not knowing people here, and you're not able to become financially secure because you're discriminated against in the job market, then your prospects and your thoughts of what your life could be post leaving the relationship are that much more limited.
Gabrielle, you're from Taumarunui. Are rural women particularly at risk?
Yeah, because, 40 k's away, well, it's going to take the police 2 hours to get there. No neighbours to help you, no neighbours to hear. So, yeah, I don't think we really get a look in with the rural stuff.
How do you deal with that, Ronnie?
It's dangerous. Like in early days, it was a lot easier for us to rock up in different parts, but you knew that there was probably more weapons like guns, because farmers have guns. But these days, you've got pea as well that you're having to deal with.
So how long does it take you to get to the side of a woman who needs help? And how much would you like to reduce that time?
It can take the next day. It's really up to the police. If they make contact with us, then we should have the opportunity to get to every high-risk case once it's made safe. In old days, we didn't wait for the police. We went there and we just had 2 or 3 of our family that were carted as well for protection, and our dogs. And then we were able to...
Took your chances.
Yeah. Well, you do. You're still creative. That's why they won't let me in the front line.
I can't see that, yeah. Gabrielle, you work with the police, you have done for 35 years. There's a new app that the police are using that allows women to record their interview on the spot in the home while the issue is fresh, I guess. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, that's the new 5F app. It's being trialled at the moment. That will just make the woman tell her story once, directly into the phone. We also, on that app, we do safety planning. The officer can't leave the scene without having done a safety plan with the victim. Obviously, depends on whether or not the offender is located or not, and roll on to refuge support services and things. Any high risk, we must follow up within 72 hours. So
overall,
we're
things getting better.
Yeah, we're trying. Yeah, trying to move the ambulance up the cliff a bit.
Obviously, the reporting rate is still way too low, and I suppose the conviction rate is way too low as well. What needs to happen between that point and the courts to improve things?
Just about everything.
Police getting to the cases and then forwarding them out to the specialist groups first within half an hour. We're pushing half an hour all the time for every case that's in Hamilton.
You want to be within 30 minutes of every case?
Yeah, we want to do that.
What kind of resources do you need for that, Ronnie?
Well, you need a full team set of, like we've got 42 staff at the moment. We probably need another extra 10 to be able to do that rotation for 24/7.
Because the fallout from it is absolutely huge, isn't it? It's in the billions of dollars, and if we could change a wee bit of stuff, we could put a bit of that money to a better use.
Yeah, maybe we could, I know this is really out there, but take a little bit away from the Rugby World Cup in the Americas.
Oh,
it would never happen.
I can tell you'd be on board with that, Deborah. What would you like
definitely. Well, I was just saying, our system is only as strong as the weakest link. So even if you enhance the crisis response and you have a fully resourced refuge support services, if you have one part of the system that isn't part of it, and like the family court, for example, works completely outside of the police, the social services, the hospital, even outside of the criminal jurisdiction. If you have one part of the system working outside of that, it pulls everything else down. And that's what Backbone has been concerned about exposing for the last 18 months.
Yeah. There are some amazing things happening, of course, and we need to acknowledge that. Gabrielle, you're otherwise known as Dr. Phil, aren't you? Because of the couch in your office at the police station in Taumarunui. You've been working in this area for years and years. How did you get into it?
I was working at the police station in the charge room, and I was tasked with trying to sort out our horrendous domestic problem that we had. So as the people came through, I basically said, "We're sick of your crap, are you sick of it?" And they surprisingly said yes. So I targeted what I considered to be our 5 worst couples, pitched them for lethality, potential lethality.
Somebody was going to die.
Yep, and also the number of call-outs that we were getting. And just began working with them, walking alongside them. No problem was too hard. Once they were well on the way to recovery, shall I say, we would take them away for a residential weekend camp with some good quality speakers and people there.
We will get to those speakers in just a second. I want to ask you though, when you approach a couple like that and you say, "We're sick of your crap," what is it that makes them take that step?
I think mainly the children. I'll often sort of pitch it at them, do you want your son or daughter to be sitting where you are in 15 years? And most of them don't.
And that's enough?
Yeah, and often that's enough.
The residential program you were talking about, you started with your dear friend Celia Lashley, didn't you?
Celia came along and worked with the woman at every camp. At first we had no money to pay her, and she just kept on coming. She did every single camp, and yeah.
You might have heard that there is a new movie that's been made by journalist Amanda Miller about Celia. It's simply called Celia, and it is incredible. If you haven't seen it yet, please do. Here's a little taste.
At the heart of my being is the plight of women. This society that we spend millions of dollars on benefit, millions of dollars trying to stop child abuse, millions of dollars trying to stop family violence, and no one has said, turn to the mothers. And so that's my thing. It is only in working with the mothers that we will get to save the lives of these children.
We lost Celia, which is still a dagger to all of our hearts, really. You had big plans with her, didn't you?
Our vision was we were going to set up a long-term residential camp where we would take 10 family units from across New Zealand at a time. We'd settled on a 12-week to coincide with the school term so the children would be integrated locally into schools, etc. However, when Celia died unexpectedly, that kind of probably knocked the wind out of my sails a little bit for the large residential, but we still continue with our normal one that we do once a month.
Well, kia ora for the work that you do, and all of you. Can I get one thing from each of you that you would do to change the game with domestic violence? Bronnie, let's start with you.
I want all the political parties to collaborate together in unity to be able to look at understanding the analysis and knowledge around family violence, sexual violence. Every 3 years comes, we dread it, the families dread it, NGOs dread it, the government officials dread it, because everything is taken away or it's chopped and changed. So we don't go anywhere. That's why in 32 years, really, there's been little change. And I'd like to see some change in that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I agree with you. One thing that I'd really love to see happen is for people in authority and people who design policy and programs and have bright ideas to ask women and children who've experienced violence and abuse, what do you need? Let survivors be at the centre of every design, implementation and review, and make that just part of what we do all the time to make sure that things are going to make a difference. Don't keep sinking money into stuff that we don't know if it's going to make any difference or not.
Anjum.
I think for us at the Ethnic Women's Centre, one of the key aspects of our work is actually building networks for these women, connecting them to each other and building the support systems that they don't have. And we do it by having this whole suite of programs where women can just come and learn and laugh together and be together. I think that's really important.
Sure. I think education. Education provides confidence to make change, and people will effect change when they're well informed, and also speeding up of processes. Mm-hmm. It drags on and on and on, the court process, be it criminal or family. For people it's just too long, their lives are on pause.
Stop calling domestic and sexual violence women's problems. It's not actually domestic violence, it's male intimate partner violence against women, and men are the perpetrators and they need to sort this out. Until men actually start to care about it, nothing is going to really change.
From what I'm hearing of this panel, the police are doing a lot better, perhaps, than they were 10 or 15, 20 years ago. The NGOs and the groups that are directly helping women are doing a wonderful job, but are under-resourced, underfunded, need more help. And the courts more widely are a bit of a mess. That be right? Please thank our panel on domestic violence.
You get a bit of room for a man around here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great occasion tonight for me and Ken here to be at this historical meeting. That's right. Not too many men out there though, Ken, I don't think. No. How many men are here tonight? Yeah. Good on you, boy. Good on you. Hey, you poor bastard. Yeah. What do you do, buddy?
Rape prevention education.
He works for rape prevention. Good on you, boy. You are a bloody hero. Yeah, that's right. You're a bloody hero, because you know what? It's not the woman that need to fix it. It's you bloody fellas that need to fix it. That's right. It's a men's problem. We've got a message for the blokes out there in New Zealand, because we want New Zealand to be the safest place in the world. Here's a little poem. She's waiting for you to listen to her. She's waiting for you to listen to her. You need to stop abusing women, physically, mentally, and emotionally. You need to stop taking drugs. You need to stop smoking poison. You need to stop abusing alcohol. You need to get your shit together. Tell her that you love her and support her. Protect her and be a good example to your kids. Teach your sons to respect women, and teach your daughters to be courageous and confident. Tell other men to stand up. She's waiting for you to listen to her. She's waiting. She's waiting. She's waiting. She's waiting.
125 years ago, many women died in childbirth. That doesn't happen quite so much these days, but health remains a huge focus for women in this country. So I'm delighted to have this panel with me today, one of whom stars in a little film we've made. So let's watch that first.
I want women to feel confident that they can fully engage in every conversation about their whānau and their community's health.
Health is everything. It is the air that we breathe, the houses that we live in, the food that we eat, the relationships we have, the thoughts that we think and the feelings that we have. It is fundamentally feminine in its whole perspective.
Mental health is something that we all have. It's how well our minds are, and the change that I want to see in mental health for young women is more conversation. As women, we need to support each other.
I want us to bring a feminine lens to the way we see health and healthcare, because it's about time that we actually listened to what women want.
Kia ora. Dr. Sash, you started running a Dr. Sash Facebook Live on a Monday night, was it?
Yep.
A few weeks ago.
Yep.
What did you find?
Well, it's been a really interesting exercise. If you want to find me, I'm at Dr. Sash on my relevant social media. So we kind of launched this in relation to Well Revolution, which is a company that I founded with my business partners, because we wanted to understand. We wanted to understand what people are interested in terms of their health. It was an experiment. Thought, okay, let's do this thing. Turn it on, press live, off we go. And it's been crazy. Like, we have had an overwhelming response to people engaging, asking questions, wanting to understand more. But I think the thing that I've seen through this process is that people are confused. And a lot of women follow this. So women are really confused about what is health, you know?
So that's a massive question.
Yeah.
What is health?
And they're really confused. Like from their diet to their exercise, you know, do I do keto versus this versus that? There's a lot of questions around what is health to me? How can I actually be healthy? And I think it raises a lot of real fundamental questions because, you know, training in medicine, you know, we learn about sick. We don't learn about health. And what people really need is guides to help us become a healthy people, you know, healthy families and a healthy society. Health literacy, or just understanding what is health, is a question from if you're living in Remuera, if you're living on Otara. It's that everyone wants to understand. I think those seeking questions are always there. And what's interesting is to explore what they want to understand and why, and how can we help facilitate real discussion around health, because there's heaps of media, there's heaps of products, goji berries, and do you know what I mean? Like, you go out there and you don't know. You think, oh, is this all natural? Is this not all natural? Should I be lifting weights or should I do cardio? Should I be taking this over that? You don't really know, and I think there's a real desire by everyone, no matter where you're from, to try and to connect to this concept of health.
Dame Margaret, no Facebook, back when you were practicing medicine.
I can say one though.
Can you tell us about some of the changes that you've seen over the years?
Yes, enormous changes. Some things have moved faster than others, I think. When I think of things like sex education, I think we're still grappling with the best way to do that. I think with regards to abortion, there were huge changes when we changed the law in 1977. Prior to that, I was involved. Well, when I was young and needed an abortion, there was no possibility. There wasn't even pregnancy tests then, and I had a do-it-yourself abortion, which was a crime in those days. And one didn't talk about it.
And often a killer too.
And many women were not as fortunate as I was and died. And one of the things that I've done in my retirement is to actually seek out some of those stories from women who died of unsafe abortion. So I've seen a big change there from having to do it yourself to when I was at the Student Health Service at Victoria Universities in the early 70s, having to refer people to Australia, which was an ordeal. People had to get a lot of money, and it was oftentimes the first time they'd ever been out of the country, and you felt as much a travel agent as a doctor trying to bridge that. And so when the law changed in 1977, it really did away with backstreet abortions and really began to do away with the traffic to Australia, although not quite then, because that's another story. But when the Auckland Medical Aid Centre reopened, then for the first time, I was able to refer people to a safe abortion facility in their own country, and that was a huge advance.
Are you astonished as the rest of us, that it is still in the Crimes Act?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you give us a potted history of how that's come about?
Well, it really came about because we inherited the English laws that went back to 1861. And then abortion was a crime, but only after quickening. But we inherited those laws and we never changed, so it stayed in the Crimes Act as a crime. Because we watched and inherited the English laws, we were quite interested in 1967 because the English law changed then, and some of us thought, well, maybe New Zealand will change as well. But it took us another 10 years. And when we did so, we introduced we certainly got rid of illegal abortionists, but we invented a very complicated system involving 2 certifying consultants. The grounds for abortion were still stayed in the Crimes Act, but there was a new system, and we had an abortion supervisory committee, which was brand new, and we had this new system of women having to prove to 2 doctors called certifying consultants that they were eligible for an abortion under one of the grounds in the Crimes Act. And the unfortunate thing is that because of the way doctors have made the law work, 98% of them are done on the grounds of mental health, which I think is wrong. And I also think it's wrong that women can't make the decision for themselves, that it has to be made by 2 strangers sometimes, 2 certifying consultants who get paid to do this.
So I'll throw this open to the whole panel because you'll all have different experiences of this, but I have heard people, sometimes politicians, mostly men, saying that this system is okay, it works all right, and we should just leave it as it is.
And I think, although obviously we don't have women travelling to Australia to access abortions, I think that one issue that we're seeing a lot is issues around equity and access to early medical abortions. And it's not equal across the country, and we've got women who have to travel outside of their hometown to access these early medical abortions. And I worry, and it's starting to come up anecdotally, that actually this is going to see a resurgence in some of the backstreet abortion services, because people know, that there's certain things that you can do, certain pills you can take, and that's a real concern, and that's what you get out of inequity, I guess, and access that's not for everyone, is those issues. And I think it's something to keep a watch on and something we need to keep the pressure on. We shouldn't have that happening now. We should be able to have access that's fair across the country. Yeah.
Julie, this sense that medicine and health is about the body only is a load of bull, isn't it? Tell us about the work that you're doing with older women in their homes.
Yeah, well, I am thinking about a lot of different issues that people have raised, and in particular, women feeling heard in response to their health needs. What I know from my experience is that health is a really holistic thing for people, is that it's not only focused on emotional wellbeing or physical health, but we also need to consider the spiritual wellbeing of people as well as that of their wider whānau. So thinking more about the collective and the wider context and what people and where people live and who they have relationships with, and how we can best support them to be good supporters of people to maintain health as well. So a lot of our mahi involves working with people where they feel comfortable in their homes. So I work a lot in South Auckland. We also travel nationally and see people in different locations. And
working with somebody in their home, what difference does that make rather than sending them off to a clinic?
I think for a start, people are genuinely a lot more relaxed and calm. We can do a real connection or relationship building exercise. We share a cup of tea, I bring some biscuits. There's a lot of whakawhanaungatanga and relationship building that starts from a really solid foundation. So the focus isn't just on illness, it's looking at well-being in a real general sense, including the person's well-being within their home environment and with the other significant people in their home. So quite often when I go and visit somebody, they might have another relative there that they want to incorporate into our session. So I provide a lot of flexibility around that. And I think that's what needs to happen in terms of providing holistic healthcare for women in Aotearoa.
That word holistic keeps coming up, and I know that a lot of you feel really strongly about it. Huhana, is Western medicine failing us?
Yes. That's easy. What we have failed to do is recognise other medicines. We've got Chinese medicine, thousands of years in development and knowledge. We have Indian medicine, thousands of years. We have Māori medicine, rungwa. Why does every hospital not have a rungwa health centre attached to it so that if I want to go for treatment, and I mean, I'm one of those ones they write off. I have MS, so therefore there's no cure, so they can't do anything. So doctors throw pills at you, but they don't throw anything else. I would love to go and see a tohunga and deal with spiritual stuff and healing stuff. I'd like rungwa medicine, Māori medicine. I'd like mere and romi. I'd like to know that I could even talk to them about my dietary needs, all of that stuff. It provides for a healthier outcome. Plus you bring your whānau in, so you get a more of a family-based type of care. It makes sense, but the problem we have in New Zealand is only 1% of all Ministry of Health funding goes to any hauora Māori services. Now we're 16% of the population, but 33% of Māori have a disability and 68% of Māori over the age of 40, with 46% under the age of 25. So we are underfunded massively, yet we have some fantastic outputs. And people already know I'm involved in medicinal cannabis and I'm legally on it. I can't afford it for much longer, so I'd love the government to get their act together, just plugging it. But, you know, just for that moment. But it's very important that we look at that. We need to look at the fact that plant-based medicines can be as effective, if not more effective, for some conditions, rather than pharmaceuticals. So why do we not open our minds, our services, and create a very robust, good primary healthcare system so that we reduce the expense and the cost at tertiary health level? If we were to re-indigenise, if the Waikato Hospital Health Medical School that they want to create was able to be Indigenous focused, say postgraduates could go there and learn all about Māori medicine and other Indigenous medicines, we could have the best health system in the world because we wouldn't limit ourselves to only Western medicine. That's too limiting.
I was just thinking about that. I want to talk about mental health because we have a crisis in this country,
Yes,
and I think we all realise that now. Rhonda, you're a police officer, you're a senior police prosecutor actually. What is the size of the problem that you see just coming through the parts of the justice system that you interact with?
Well, obviously the big one that we're concerned about still is meth. And I don't think people actually fully understand, unless they've experienced addiction, either directly or indirectly, just how serious an effect that has, not only on the individual but on the people around them. So people will say, oh, how could she neglect her children like that, not feed her children, spend her money on things? That's the nature of the power of an addiction like that. You simply lose all your humanity. Interestingly enough, I've just been invited to go to another graduation of the Alcohol and Drug Addiction Court. So that's one initiative that seems to be actually addressing that problem, but that's dealing with the real hard end of offenders. But throughout my career, I've often found ourselves having to use the justice system to access mental health care.
When in actual fact, those issues of mental health need to be treated to prevent people from recidivism, right? From reoffending.
Yeah, it's absolutely a factor. And it's also one of the places where we kind of we end up being the meat in the sandwich. We are not trained psychologists or psychiatric nurses. Our job for the most part is arresting, it by force if necessary, bad people. and then we get a call to a job where somebody is mentally ill, and there is a provision under the Mental Health Act in Section 109 for us to actually take them into custody in order to get them to somebody who can assess them, again, by force if necessary. And that's a very, very difficult position for our staff to find themselves in, because you're really having to take off one hat, which is the enforcer hat, and put on the health professional hat. And the courts are actually very strict in their scrutiny of the way we apply that. So it can be a very tricky situation for young cops especially.
It's hard from a doctor perspective too.
Yeah.
You know, like the whole boundary, we were talking about it before, you know, the boundary between health and the crime, you know, putting someone in the Mental Health Act is really hard, and it's you're stuck. You know, you're looking at someone you want to help, who needs help, but they're not so unwell that you have to enforce the Mental Health Act. But there's this big gap that you're like, you clearly need something, but I can't make you do anything.
Phyllis, I want to bring you in here because you're GM of Māori Health at Lakes District DHB. How difficult has it been to get a DHB, an organisation like that, to acknowledge Tau Māori?
Look, I'm really excited about this subject, and I think we need a 3-day wānanga to discuss it.
Okay,
but
absolutely.
I want to say quickly to Rhonda that whilst meth, yes, is a problem, alcohol misuse is still by far the greatest danger to our communities, particularly our young people. The self-harm rate of Māori, of many people in emergency departments, is incredible. At any one time in Rotorua Hospital, would see anything up to 2 to 3 people a day presenting with self-harm related incidents. So for Māori, for example, the current system doesn't work. We know that, we've seen it. Huhana's talked about the issues for Māori in health generally. And I must say, Huhana, I thought, oh, thank goodness I'm working in the area I do, because we do have access to rongoa for our patients and families. We have access to miri in the hospital environment, but that's taken a long time to navigate a health system. And health literacy is hugely important. You have to know what that continuum of care looks like, where you can access different things. For example, any individual who might require some alternate type care at end stage of life can go to the GP and actually say, I know I get $300 for this wrapped in that primary health care package. Yes. I want to go and spend it at a rongoa clinic having kawakawa, for example. If we know what we can access in that health journey, I think is hugely important.
Julie, what would be, this is a really hard one, what would be the one thing that you would do to try and bring down our horrendous suicide rate in this country?
In terms of suicide, I think they definitely, in mental health in general, it needs to be more of an emphasis on prevention and keeping people well, on flourishing in life, not focusing on the symptomology and what you require to present to mental health services, but focusing on how do we build resilience, how do we stay well, how do we flourish in life.
I would also suggest that if we're really serious about flipping it over and making it about health, not sickness, then give people the ability to self-direct their funding.
Kia ora.
Give people the ability to decide. Give the people the empowerment to make decisions for themselves and their families. It's not about me. I'm good at writing scripts and having a bit of a yarn and stuff, but I can't tell you how to live your life. I can't tell you what's health to you. I can't
But we
tell
do that,
you.
don't we?
Yeah, but no, I do that.
Moralise.
I'm like, yes, I think you're going to need some non-steroidals and blah, blah, blah. Here you go. That's because it's how I was taught. And I've got to be careful because that's the bureaucracy that I have to reinforce in the system that I come from. But what I really want to say is, hey man, your back pain, actually, you know what you need to do? You need to do some squats, and you actually need to get out there and stretch some of this and do some of that and get out and walk your dog every day. And actually, I do say that, but I shouldn't.
I bet you do. I'm going to take that as your wrap-up comment. I'd like a little kind of one wish from all of you. Can we start with you, Hannah?
I want disabled women to have full and free access to all forms of healthcare. Many disabled women are denied mammograms, are denied cervical cancer smear testing, are denied major healthcare prevention access, and so I just want that.
Say, Margaret.
When I think back to the sad cases where women, not just women, but people were just afraid to come to the health service. So that's great. From the family planning, I think we can still make that more accessible. And from abortion, we've got a little bit of hope on the horizon because the Minister of Justice has asked the Law Commission to have a look at some options for making abortion a health issue and not a crime any longer. And we're expecting the report on that next month, towards the end of October. I'm hopeful that this may be a change.
You and me both. Rhona.
You know, there's a lot of stuff that's going on out there in society where people are dissing other people and putting down other people's options and needs and things like that. And I just think, well, you know, the answer to that really is just don't. Don't be a dick about it. You know, it actually takes effort to take a view about someone else's life and needs, and I'm speaking here as a trans woman, and I've also been down the suicide path, so I know a bit about that because that comes with that package. But it takes effort to actually insult somebody or stand up against something that's their business and their needs. All you actually have to do is just don't.
Kia ora.
I like, well, I print that on a t-shirt.
Just
Isis. Well, I totally agree with the just don't.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I'd also like, I guess it's boring, but you know, looking at the social determinants of health and making people's lives easier so that our day-to-day, it's not so stressful, that we actually have capacity for people to deal with some of those health issues. And it's like, you know, we say all the time, you know, you're not doing this or you're doing this wrong, you know, Māori women aren't accessing antenatal care early enough, all of these things. And it's like, what if that's not your priority? What if your baseline is shoes on your feet, like food on the table? You don't have capacity to access more. So I'd like us to look at that so that we can say we can build health literacy, we can empower people. But I think we have to start there before we can start anywhere in terms of building resilience and self-care and all of those things. We actually have to start addressing those things that actually are a barrier to the really baseline access to health.
Glad you've had a good time.
Julie. I co-talk what everybody has said. I'd like to see a healthcare system that embraces whānau ora, that has a key treatment of aroha and showing compassion and love to each other, and is just inclusive and accommodates to all diverse communities in Aotearoa.
I want it all. But I think the other thing is for those leaders within the health system to be really clear about what the needs of the people are and to listen to the voices of women, particularly Māori women.
Kia ora. And that is our show. A huge thank you to all of our expert panellists right throughout today for your vision and also your expertise and your hope that you all bring to women right across this wonderful country of ours. Here's to the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in New Zealand, Aotearoa.
Okay, let's party! Hit that music, buddy! This is for the dames, from the dames. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. Untouchable, untouchable, have guts. Yeah, we're untouchable, but we touch. We're untouchable, touchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're strappy, we're aggressive, we'll take over the world. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, touchable girls. Girls. We're untouchable, touchable girls. Girls. We're untouchable, touchable girls.